man, woman, whatever, turning this person into a like an like an effigy for all of their stresses and fears and anger over what's happening to women in women's sports. I feel like there's something getting lost there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe I know that's not a popular opinion. People won't like that.
Well, I felt terrible about this person, just like someone even discussing what are my genes, like in front of everybody. On the other hand, if this person previously had been not allowed to play in a women's thing because of some considerations, like and pushed it to try to go to the Olympics, like they kind of already knew they were in some category where there could be controversy.
Mhm.
So there's a little bit of stepping into, if you're putting yourself in a public spotlight with
Mhm.
that could come up. I don't know if I can entirely be sympathetic. Oh, at the same time, I was like, oh my gosh, if people were discussing what are
Yeah.
the generals? I mean, you know what I mean? Like about you in
Mm.
public, like out.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that I thought about was for my mother, she wasn't a masculine looking woman. I don't think so. I think she was very pretty. But she was very tall. She was 5'11". And we lived in South Texas, where average women's height is pretty short because there's a lot of Hispanic women. So probably the average is a little bit shorter than the national average. And so the disparity was even more. And she was always very sensitive about being perceived as a male in women's spaces. She was a swimmer, a competitive swimmer, and she felt very aware of like herself having a big frame compared to the other women around. Thank you. And so this was an area of sensitivity for her. And she would have been mortified for somebody to think she was actually a man. She would have been mortified, but it was kind of like this, um, I guess a little bit of a neurosis for her. She just worried about that. And so I think about, did you see just like, was it last week or the week before? There were these videos going around of this other athlete who's a woman, and she's a rugby player, I think. Did you see this? She's very,
Mm-mm.
very masculine jawline. She's tall, she's strong, she's gorgeous hair. She's obviously, when she starts talking, you can tell she's a woman. She's very feminine voice, and it's clear she's a woman. But you can also see why, especially in the age of the trans hysteria, people would be pegging her for a man and calling her out because her jawline is so masculine, and she's got a really strong face, strong features. Well, she recorded a picture of herself or a video of herself crying and talking about the pain of everybody calling her a man and saying that women aren't just one size fits all. They're not all little petite flowery little things. And if you guys are doing this to me, I just feel for all the girls out there who don't fit your mold of what a woman's supposed to look like. And it really breaks my heart that that there's that this much vitriol comes, this much hostility coming at me for just looking too masculine for you guys. And so I don't know. I kind of then I take that to the Imani Khalif person, which I don't know, man, woman, I don't know. It sounds like this person grew up female and was raised female. I don't know. But the pain of being called out for that just kind of struck me.
I don't know. I mean, I don't. I think the DSD angle of this is just it's so neat and tidy that it makes gender critical people and women and people who defend no men and women's sports, which is beyond kind of an emergency problem at this point. It's so prevalent, even in places like Ireland, where the Irish football teams now allow boys to play on girls' teams. It's very much a contact sport. Um,
Ooh.
and I think so this DSD thing is like almost like a gotcha in the face of the gender critical people to say, oh look, no, it's not. Look, this isn't what you think it is, and it's almost like they're walking into a trap, which is why I haven't written about it, and I don't want to because um, I feel like it's a ploy to draw out people and then to make them look bad or to prove them wrong if this person turns out to have been born genuinely intersex or do with DSD. I don't even know if intersex and DSD are interchangeable. Fundamentally, like there was a boxing organization not affiliated with the Olympics that said that this person should not have been fighting a woman, and it just really fundamentally, does this person meet the chromosomal criteria, and does it have a penis and balls or not? I don't, or did it ever have those things? And it shouldn't be that hard to figure out. I think the fact that there's so much obfuscation around it and so much lack of clarity, it makes me so suspicious. I think that, yeah, I don't know. I think it stinks to high heaven, the fact that this person is in this role. Whether this man or woman feels terrible about it, I have no idea. Doesn't seem so. Like she's winning. She is winning. So, she certainly doesn't look like, I mean, I know exactly what you mean though, Leslie, because like female beauty is something that if you really don't have it, and if you really look mannish, and if you really go through life like maybe extremely overweight or cross-eyed, or those are true burdens to bear for women. Like being denied access to that prestige that privilege that you just have if you happen to be born with an tremendously symmetrical face or perfect bone structure and good height to weight ratio. It's very painful. It's part of becoming an adult, is learning to live with those imperfections and learning to, develop other sides of yourself in terms of attractiveness. Women have been struggling with that since literally forever, since we came out of the caves. So I don't know.
Yep.
In this case, I'm just like, I don't know. It feels very manufactured to me.
Yeah. Let's see. Kay in the chat says the conversation regarding Imani Khalif has been really hard to get a handle on, but I get stuck because she would have learned about this a while back and should have been addressed proactively.
I agree. That's 100% what I think.
Jennifer, you're muted. Do you want to chime in?
I was just saying, yeah, I agree. That makes sense.
Well, we didn't even introduce ourselves today. Hello, everybody. Today is, I think it's episode 79 for Solid Ground. And I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce. I'm here with Jennifer Friend, Deborah Knox, and Jenny Holland. And we're delighted to be with you. Thank you all for joining us in the chat. Deborah, do you want to read the intro to Solid Ground?
Sure. Solid Ground is a peer support community for anyone concerned about the imposition of critical social justice and/or COVID mandates in their workplace, university, children's school, or community. We offer weekly online peer support groups in which members share ideas, thoughts, and support for how to navigate the impact of these ideologies and answer the question, where do we go from here? You can join one of our groups for only $5 a month. To find out how to join our community, please visit solidgroundsupport.com. And please note, Solid Ground does not provide psychotherapy or legal advice, and nothing we do should be construed as such. I also just want to add a quick thing. We got a new member yesterday coming to our groups because she subscribes to your newsletter, Jenny, and you mentioned being on this podcast. So she went over to Radical Center, and then she came over. Yeah.
Oh, that's
so
great.
cool.
It'd be great if she was in the live stream too. I hope so. Yeah, I actually meant to do that today, is send out a reminder, but I forgot.
Yeah.
I need a reminder for myself.
Well, yep. Join the groups if you guys are interested in coming and being a part of the conversation. It's always a really lovely place to land with intelligent, thoughtful people to talk to. So let's see. So we were talking a little bit about the boxing scandal. We could go, I'm sure that is a topic that could go on forever, but there's a lot more to talk about. And we have some viewer comments that we wanted to bring in, as well as Deborah, you had, do you want to introduce another topic or go into a viewer comment?
I don't know. See, I had viewer comments, but I don't know if any of them are that juicy. So if anyone else has ones that go, wow, this would be great for us to plumb, I'd suggest we do that first, because mine were just more, oh, that's interesting. Kind of comments.
Yeah, either way, that's great. Well, does anybody have a juicy comment that they want to read, or because I could pull one up if you guys want to. There was one that I really liked recently. You just get over to it. So this one was let's see, I have to get to it now. From the episode we did that we called Narrative Control and the Longhouse. It was number 74. It was the four of us talking. Patrick Barnes, 9874, said, I was shocked to see 4 out of 4 women being understanding about the sex drives of men. This was one of the original things that polarized me against women. My whole life, I got told how horrible PMS is and that it's my job as a man to be understanding and supportive and basically be a punching bag for my wife several days a month. There's absolutely nothing out there telling women that they need to exercise some self-control, and PMS is not a get out of jail free card to be emotionally abusive. Happy wife, happy life. At the same time as being told, that their elevated hormones give women a license to be rude as they want, the fact that men have 10 times the amount of sex hormone in their bodies than women is completely ignored. Guys are told the complete opposite about their own elevated hormone levels than girls and women are. Now it's a problem that doesn't exist, and it's just toxic masculinity, and it's completely unreasonable and controlling to expect any empathy or sympathy from your wife. As an adolescent, I remember reading articles about how men lie about the physical pain of prolonged arousal to take advantage of innocent women, and women shouldn't fall for it. In fact, I believed it myself such that when I got old enough to experience the pain, I thought something was wrong with me. And to put the cherry on top, then women are encouraged to use sex as a punishment and reward system to control their husbands, make him sleep on the couch, not tonight, I have a headache, etc. So it appeared to me that women can use it to their advantage when they can manipulate men, but then deny it exists when they can't. It's not that this issue itself is a big deal. It just happens that this was one of my wake-up calls to society being driven by political narratives more than truth. It was the realization that feminists were not in fact interested in equal rights for both sexes, and that what people who claimed to be interested in equality and compassion were gaslighting and lying. So it is amazing to me to see this particular issue being discussed by 4 women, and all 4 are taking a compassionate view toward men's experience. It's a very long and juicy comment, and there's a lot there. And it just, it makes me think the war of the sexes thing. It's been going on for a long time, and there's so much just you this and he that and she that, and that's a really painful thing. And it seems like all of those things kind of caricaturize women and men, and they leave out the reality, which is much more subtle and complex.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I think from your first reading of it, I actually didn't see that comment in on the page, but I agree with him. I think that the sort of normal discourse, the normal public conversation has focused for so long on the bad behavior of men that women's own bad behavior, and especially women's responsibilities to themselves even have been lost in the anger and in the upset and in the righteousness. And I think men get a pretty tough time in the discourse. Having said that, there's a lot of misogyny in the world. Obviously, there's a lot of I find the conservative men on the online sphere to be almost laughably innocent, but not in a nice way, in a kind of sometimes quite a dumb way, in that they seem to think, and they seem to have an emotional need to think of women as of the past as having been these pure virtuous angels. And I always say that that's like, there's never been a time where that has happened. There's only been a time where like the bitches and the hoes were much more severely punished. Okay. The bitches and the hoes of today don't really get punished, at least not by the public sphere and the kind of the mainstream morality. But they've always existed.
But no, I say that we encourage bitchery and hoery a little bit more than we used to.
100%. 100%. I mean, certainly on social media, certainly places like TikTok and Instagram and Twitter or whatever, X, not everyone encourages it everywhere, but it's certainly not frowned upon, except by the sort of manosphere type, and the Matt Walshes of the world, who I don't think well, you know, I understand their position. I don't actually even hate their position. I just don't think I think it lacks some depth, and it's like an insular position to have. It's not going to win over liberals, and whatnot. I'm not necessarily singling Matt Walsh out or criticizing him unduly. I just think that, you know, in that corner of the internet, it's not rewarded, but mainstream society, yeah, I think it is rewarded. I feel for men as well, because I think a lot of the times men simply lack the emotional wherewithal to deal with women, even just day-to-day normal stuff. I think women are far more emotionally evolved and complex. And if you can't give that sort of parry back and forth, and that verbalization and that discussion, that endless ability to talk through things and even argue and nitpick and fight and you're always at, you know, like if you can't handle that in a woman, you're going to have a hard life. Life is not going to be fun for you. And a lot of men are not very good at it. And that doesn't mean to say they're monsters or they're abusers or their brains work very differently in my experience. And I've only had that experience in the last couple of years, by the way. I never knew that until I was like in my late 40s.
Deborah, I saw you smiling. Did you have a thought?
Sorry. I must admit I have trailed off.
Uh,
So I don't even know what I just smiled at, to be honest.
Busted.
So no comment.
Yeah, Jennifer, what do you think?
Oh, I just think men and women are such, for heaven's sake, Henry, are such different. He's so sweet. He kills me. I just think we're such different creatures, and it causes a lot of pain, and it also causes a lot of harmony. Not harmony, comedy. And then when you have those moments of harmony, it's all the more precious. And so, you know, I try to find the good in it, but I can't say that male-female relationships haven't caused me a great deal of pain in my own life, because they have.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Same.
Well,
Interestingly, though, the worst breakups I've had, including my divorce, have been with my female friends. Not, you know, non-romantic female relationship. Because like I think my love for my female friends, not every single one of them, but I've had on two occasions I've lost female friends that I just shattered my heart. So yeah, but I agree with you, Jen. It's really like the men. I've cried many tears, many tears over men.
yeah, I think I'm glad. I was pleased to see that comment. I liked that he shared a little bit about his own experience, but it really felt, I guess, validating to have that perspective back, because I don't, you know, I don't want to present or I don't think I think in a one. There's this one guy. It's Orwell's house cat. Hi, Orwell's house cat, if you're watching. But he's always criticizing me for being a feminist. He's like, she's a feminist. She's a feminist. This feminism.
Really not.
And I'm like, I don't know what that even means, really. I'm just kind of I take some feminist viewpoints. Some other ones are not some that I favor, but I don't want to lose sight of, you know, this whole idea that women are humans and men aren't, or we have, there's this, it is the same from either direction. My dad is a wonderful man. I have wonderful brothers. I have a wonderful husband. I have sons. And most of the literature that I've read that I've loved in my life and poetry has been written by men. I think men are capable of amazing things. And so I really appreciated that they were able to see that. I want to jump though, because I know we've spent a lot of time on this, and I just saw in the chat a comment that links to something else that we were talking about. So Clem62 says, could you discuss what is happening in Britain and Ireland with all the violence and protests? And
Yes.
Deborah, would you maybe, you're muted, I
Jenny
think.
might.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
Oh, I think Jenny might know more of the details. The little bit, I'll say the little bit I know, and then Jenny, you could please correct me or fill in the gaps. Well, I think I'd sort of back up by understanding anyway of what's been happening in the UK. I don't know about Ireland really, but I'm guessing it's similar. Is that, you know, there's been just like an unprecedented amount of immigration in the last few years. I think somewhere I said the number of people coming in over, I don't know, a very small band of time is the same number of people that came from 1066 to, I don't know, 1960 or something. And so it's, you know, it's a huge influx of people, and it does seem that a lot of the people that are coming aren't, there's a good amount of Muslim population. There just might not be exactly a similar cultural, or not even just cultural, but just even general like value system fit, like, you know, being in a liberal democracy, the roles of women and such. And the way I think the UK has handled it originally was more this multicultural strategy, as they call it, which is just kind of let every little culture be there and kind of do their own thing in their own little circles. And there wasn't so much around asking people to assimilate. In the meantime, I think there's been this decolonized movement, this sort of denigration of whiteness, and you know, anything that's white is suspect. If people want to have an identity like being British, that's sort of being put down in favor of something more inclusive. And there have been over the years combination of different things. There's been just sort of either violent incidents, maybe like knifing things going on. Since they don't have guns, they don't have that sort of situation. That one of the big scandals, which I only discovered a few years ago, was the grooming gangs scandals, where there have been in mostly, you know, kind of middle or kind of less wealthy northern towns, that there have been, certainly not all, but there have been certain groups of men from Pakistan who have been basically, you know, kind of luring in very young, often, you know, working class white girls, maybe first giving them candy or giving them, and then maybe giving them drink or something like that, and then using them sexually, and even not simply just raping them or gang raping them, but also literally like talking down to them about their being white, and like subjecting them and sort of, and this is sort of disgust on the basis of their whiteness. And, you know, whatever level of government, there's been a like, we don't want to really talk about this. We don't really want to investigate it. So the fact that this has been going on for years and police have not really until recently been dealing with it, they'd often say, oh, those girls, they're just slutty. Oh, those girls, whatever. And just like, oh, and so in some ways it was like your working class person was just sort of like, that's their garbage, you know, on a class basis. And so I think there's a simmering, more than a simmering, like I think there are people, and then also let's add October 7th, and then sort of protesting, pro-Palestine protesting, especially in large city centers, where there's been almost this, starting to look like a little bit two-tier policing. Like if people were Jewish, they'd be sort of told, well, don't really come here because you're provoking people.
Yeah.
And we might not protect you, but we're not going to, if the people that are protesting for Palestine, whatever, if they're doing something wrong, we're not going to do anything. But if you're a white person and you said something online that's we decided is hate speech, which might be not even anything that we would consider hate speech, the police are going to come to your house. So what just happened, I guess, this last weekend, and I don't know the origin of the person who committed this thing, but somebody went into a school, like a dance school, young children, they were doing a little Taylor Swift kind of dance. And I think he, you know, killed 3 of them. And I think maybe there's another 6, I forget how many more are injured. And this ended up sparking massive riots, mostly white people, you know, just going, trashing places. I think they went after a mosque, looting, you know, like all sorts of behavior I don't think any of us would be supporting. I should also add, there's a person who's been kind of trying to rally people, and it's hard. He's been pegged as far right Tommy Robinson, like for many, many years. Even Jordan Peterson interviewed him recently, and I don't really know where he stands, but he's one of these people like, we want to protect Britain. Like, we should get to agriculture. We should get to be proud of it. And I'm not going to, and he's been arrested so many times and all of this. And so I don't know where he was involved in all this, but anyway, there's a lot of mayhem, and it looks like Keir Starmer, the new prime minister, is kind of coming down. I mean, they don't want the violence, but it sounds like they just want to turn the screws in on anybody doing this sort of mayhem that's kind of on the white side. But it doesn't sound like there's anything really going on about any sort of like unrest or things that are happening on the other side. Anyway, that's what I understand. So Jenny, maybe you can fill
Yeah.
in or correct.
Sorry, I was just like fact checking a few things that I was gonna planning on saying when you were talking, but I was listening as well. Yeah, so I live in Northern Ireland, which is one of the places that had some violence over the weekend, some rioting in Belfast, in the city where I live. But yes, you're right. Basically, everything you said, Deborah, was certainly, generally correct in that. So there's two parallel tracks of this that are crashing together. The British working class has been completely decimated, much like the American, but probably more so, and they're further along in their destruction. Britain was an industrial powerhouse up until the the middle of the 20th century, I guess, and it's been a managed decline project ever since. I call it a sort of a cultural genocide, what's happened to the British working class and the Northern Irish working class as well. And I'm not being inflammatory. They have been marginalized. They live on estates that are not that different from sort of Indian reservations. They have access. Everyone has access to free healthcare here, and in theory anyway, fairly decent education. So the safety net level, it's better. But certainly since the mid to late 90s, the cultural denigration of working class life has been just the dominant trope. People they went after darts because they took away the walk-on girls, the girls who would in skimpy shorts who would walk around holding the number of the, or like they played some role before the men would go do the darts. Darts being a huge sport in like working class social clubs across these islands. The smoke, it costs like so much money to buy cigarettes here now. The whole kind of slightly rough and tumble, slightly bawdy working class culture has been just crapped on. And cool Britannia and this multicultural hipster cool Britain that came about first during Tony Blair has really been quite snide toward the working class. And the Labour Party, the worst part of it is the Labour Party, the clue is in the name, obviously, literally is supposed to represent this working class, have become credentialed professional managerial class elites. There was one high-ranking labor official in like maybe 10 years ago making snide comments about the white van man and going into a neighborhood where there were English flags and being like, "Oh, this is disgusting. Who are these louts?" And this is a Labor Party, not a Conservative Party, Labor Party, right? At the same time, you've had all of these people coming in for like the earlier ones, from my understanding of it, were from Muslim countries in South Asia, the Pakistani, a lot of Indians too, who don't really get embroiled in this right now because the focus is on Islam. But there's cities now that are largely South Asian and not white, not British white.
Mm-hmm.
The Rotherham thing was incredibly disturbing. It was a scandal that really dwarfs almost any other that I can think of. That these impoverished white working class communities where there was a lot of alcoholism, marital breakdown, family breakdown, drugs. These Pakistani men, I don't know. There's a lot of them involved, so I don't know how many of them were born.
Is this
if
the
any of them
grooming
were born.
gangs?
Yeah,
Is
the
that
grooming
the
gang.
Rotherham? Okay.
I don't know if they were born
And
in
that's
England.
not just in that city. That happens in multiple cities across England. And from what I have been told, still continues to this day.
We had someone in the counterweight community, I don't think she came over here, who was a victim of.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Really?
I know a woman who is as well. I found her. We found each other on Twitter. I don't know her identity, but she's talked to me about that on the phone, saying that she was targeted because she was a white girl and she was vulnerable and she was trafficked.
Isn't there these in some of these religions where women are very subjugated and very covered up? They see the white women who don't participate in this as necessarily more loose and more
licentious,
more amoral. Yeah.
Yeah. And these are vulnerable girls. These are young girls, that young teenagers who already have come from broken homes. A lot of them were already kind of in and out of the foster system, and they were getting picked up out of the foster system by these men. Now, an interesting little fact here is that the current prime minister was a prosecutor who was reluctant to go after these grooming gangs back when the story first broke. The story only broke because I think it was a policewoman was absolutely dogged in her determination to go after these guys, even though she was getting continually rejected by every institution she went to try and help her defend these girls. She was constantly getting knocked back and being told, "Oh no, we're not going to go after." Well, there might be a problem, but we're not going to do anything about it. We don't want to be called Islamophobic. We don't want to be called X, Y, and Z. At the same time, don't forget, starting around 2005, the UK then started having a problem with Islamic terrorism. And in July of 2005, there was a series of bombings in London on the tube and on the bus system. It killed maybe 100 people or something like that. So again, that Labour was in government at that point as well, and they were getting involved in the whole Iraq War fiasco and all this stuff. So there's been decades of resentments built up, including, so you have the Rotherham girls and all the other girls, not just the town of Rotherham, but all the girls who were victims of grooming gangs, specifically because they were vulnerable white girls. And then you have
and because they were non-Muslims, because a lot of these people were told that this is because they were kafirs, infidels.
Yes. And also then you had a lot of Islamic extremists operating openly and freely throughout London, including Osama bin Laden, who operated in London for some time before 9/11. And the British establishment just simply turned a blind eye to them. They were considered to be, the British establishment liked to think of itself as extremely sophisticated, extremely cosmopolitan, and like, oh no, we're very free here, and we're very welcoming to all dissidents and all political dissidents and refugees, and even people who hold views that we consider to be wacky. Then they started killing people. Islamists started killing people, and again, the response was like, oh, this is so terrible, but our communities are going to come together, and we're going to we're actually very multicultural, and the non-Muslims and the Muslims get along really well in real life. Whereas there was plenty of people. No, I mean, I don't know personally, but I can say this for certain. There's plenty of people who have presented very convincing evidence otherwise, and have been doing so since the first decade of the 2000s.
I want to add going on all that time. Sorry, I just want to add a quick thing on there too, which is it's not also simply white people and Muslims, but some of these resentments, historical enmities come into the country because like there's Hindus and Muslims who might have battles and be fighting it out in these different towns too. So it's like not just the white people.
Yes. And
interesting.
So, but it's like every decade piles on a new pile of tinder to be lit. And just to fast forward up to last week or the week before last, a young man who wasn't Muslim, as far as I know, but was the child of Rwandan immigrants, stabbed to death 3 little girls in a town called Southport, which is near Liverpool. And Liverpool is Northern England. Liverpool is very working class. Liverpool is exactly what you think of when you think of like that traditional English industrial and post-industrial community. Now, after October 7th, after the attacks in Israel, almost every weekend there's been mass demonstrations against Israel. Jews have been singled out. Jewish neighborhoods in London have been singled out. So when when the riots started in Southport, I wasn't surprised at all, and I'm not at all surprised that the prime minister, who I find to be immensely creepy, has come out and really kind of inflammatory language about these far right thugs. Now, but interestingly, because that language has never been used against the stabber of the 3 children, or even that degree of of hostility wasn't even expressed when a suicide bomber blew up 20 kids, or I forget the number, at an Ariana Grande concert about 10 years ago.
Yes.
Okay,
We're
a
told
bunch of
don't look
12-year-old
back in
girls.
hate.
Yes, were
Right.
blown to pieces at an
Don't
Ariana
look
Grande.
back. Don't look back in hate. All of these
Yes.
things are said to people.
Right.
Oh, you know,
Exactly.
let's
So
forgive. Let's this.
Yes.
Let's that. It's utter crap.
And a quick
So
thing I want to say. A quick thing I just want to say on that, because something I read this morning was that, in fact, the government would do things, not only just look on hate, they would organize, let's have a peaceful vigil. And a lot of that was a top-down, I don't want to call it propaganda, whatever thing of like, let's just do this in all these communities. So it wasn't even just saying it was like, let's cause these vigils to happen. Whatever. Sorry, go ahead.
Exactly. And then and something similar has happened in Ireland too, which is a lot more surprising in a way, because this is a problem that's started coming into Ireland much more recently. You know, Ireland in the 2000s definitely had a lot of migration from Eastern Europe and stuff like that. But in the last 2 years has seen a huge influx of people from all over the world. And again, I haven't done direct reporting on this myself, but I've seen a lot of sources saying that these are basically undocumented, unvetted single men who are coming into the country, and the government is forcing small Irish towns and country in the countryside and of course in poor working class Dublin neighborhoods to accept the housing of large numbers, like up to 200 of these men coming in and taking over school buildings and taking over hotels. And in November of last year, an Algerian who had permission to had been in the country for 20 years, but I think was undergoing. They were for some reason there was a process to try and deport him that he kept defeating. He stabbed a bunch of little kids outside a nursery school in the north of Dublin city center, which again
would
is
they do
very
this
working
to
class.
kids? Why would they be targeting children in these attacks?
I mean, it just keeps happening over and over again.
Yeah.
And
it's just incredible.
At a certain point, it becomes very, I find it very suspicious. Again, I think so the riots that broke out, to me, the interesting thing about them is that in Belfast, which again, not to go on a whole nother tangent, but has its own history of sectarian violence, culminating in a small civil war that killed thousands of people over 30 years. Apparently on Saturday, a lot of the protesters that are dubbed in the media as extreme right, from Dublin, so from the south of Ireland, have come up to Belfast and gone to loyalist neighborhoods, which were very hostile to the Dublin, to Dubliners, to Southerners, to the Dublin government, and have made some degree of common cause. And I was doubting this, actually. And then there was a report in our local paper that they had an all-night drinking session. The working class men from Dublin had an all-night drinking session with the loyalist paramilitaries, UDA, who 30 years ago they would have killed them. They would have killed these people from Dublin in theory, right? So I mean, it was in the local paper. Who knows?
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Right. So essentially, it's a class war. We are watching a class war play out. There's only two possible explanations for its start. It was either done deliberately by elites or through incredibly bad policy and incompetence. So which one is it? Is it malevolence or is it incompetence? I mean,
both. Maybe both.
I don't know.
Okay.
It could be both.
What do you
but
think?
I was, funnily enough, I was writing some notes on something today. I'll just read this thing from the aftermath of the 2005 bombings in London. Okay, the Deputy Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Brian Paddock, asserted, quote, "Islam and terrorism don't go together," adding, "We've got Londoners, faith groups, everybody being united in adversity as a result of the attacks, rather than fragmenting, which I think just says something about the uniqueness of London and the spirit of the people of London." That was in 2005, after 100 people were blown up by suicide bombers in the name of Islam. And I just think that this is such a shocking quote.
Wow.
Think of that. Like 20 years later, how has that aged? Like milk. Okay.
Yeah.
This is how diluted.
This has been happening. But this has been happening over and over and over again. I cannot remember which attack it was. It might have been the Ariana Grande attack. But what does Obama say after that. This has less to do with Islam than any other religion. It wasn't the Buddhists, it wasn't the Quakers. And if Islam has nothing to do with violence, then there seem to be a lot of people that have some kind of confusion about that, because it keeps happening, and it keeps happening for those reasons, specifically for reasons of ideology. And I don't know why this recent stabbing happened, so I'm not speaking to that, but I'm speaking in general. There have been terrorist attacks motivated by the religion itself, by a particular interpretation of that religion. And to ignore that is to refuse to actually look at the problem in the face and figure out what to do about it. And people are losing their lives over it. And countries are also losing their culture, because we are letting in people from extremely disparate cultures where the foundation on which we're standing, the belief system, the underpinnings, the structure is not remotely the same. It simply is not. And to be in denial about that, I think, will be our downfall.
Yes, that's very well said. That's very, very well said. I think that in England, I think the UK is slightly further along the road that the United States is currently on. But the utter disdain, contempt, and hatred of the British professional managerial class elite has for the working class white
gammons.
The white man, their compatriots, because of their class status, the fear and loathing of the class status below this class is extreme. And the white working class has been continuously demanded of them that they take aback, that their safety when it comes to their losses of their own children and their communities takes a back seat to the need to be extremely polite and nice about specific attackers. I'm not talking on a macro level. Actually, I'm not. I agree with what you say about Islam, but even to remove that as a factor, it's not just that. It's like, oh, are you a white working class community that has had all of your jobs taken away and a large proportion of your young girls raped? Oh, sorry. Well, you're just going to have to accept that, because it's more important that we pay homage to this false idea of multicultural sophistication from which you get zero benefit. In fact, you're getting absolutely raped over it, but you're just going to have to lump it because we know better. We're smarter than you. We're better than you. You're just like scum, and you're just going to have to live with the consequences of being born into scum. It's like a caste system. So the absolute urgent need when any of these bad things happen on behalf of the media, the chattering classes, and the policymakers is to, make sure we don't upset the people who have committed these crimes. That is the number one priority.
I think this underscores this whole issue of assimilation, immigration and assimilation so well. I was talking with Jim McMurtry, who's a Canadian teacher, last week. I'll put the video up probably tomorrow or the next day on my channel. But one of the things that he has talked about is in the Canadian schools, this is in Britain, but this is kind of similar, like we're in love with multiculturalism to the extent that they're instructed not to eat around the Muslim students during Ramadan, and not to, don't eat in front of them, and let them be tell the other kids not to eat in front of them. It's rude to eat in front of them because you have to respect the observance that they're doing. And this is an interesting conversation, because what if these are the anti-colonialists, the same ideology that is saying the colonialists are bad, what am I trying to say? Like imperialism, not empiricalism, imperialism, but that too. Imperialism is bad. You shouldn't transmit your culture to other cultures. You should let them have their own culture, but your culture is nothing. Your culture your white Western culture is a big fat nothing that should be rewritten by other cultures. And there's this whole, like, we're in love with the indigenous, but when an immigrant comes over, as long as they're darker skinned than you, their cultural observances take priority, and you should just lay down yours and respect theirs. So there's something there that's missing. We're missing something about assimilation. Deborah,
Well,
and someone on Twitter, just real quick, someone on Twitter put, which was like, it was said, when does an immigrant actually equal a settler colonialist? At what point? Right.
right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sorry, Jen.
Yeah. Oh, well, and England and the United States are allowing mosques and madrasas, the schools, the Islamic schools, where people are absolutely being taught that the infidels which means non-Muslims, are inferior beings and should be brought on board or eventually penalized for their refusal to come on board. And there are people that are absolutely wanting and demanding that the host countries bend a knee to them, that they allow people to be essentially, plotting from within to take over the culture, to convert everybody. And if you read the Quran and you read the Hadiths, this is absolutely what they're told to do. And they are told to penalize people with a special tax, a jizra, who do not obey this. And unlike any other religion, if somebody converts away from Islam, the penalty for that is death. So this is different. It is different than the Christian zeal to convert people. And it is much more threatening and much more oppressive. And all of these woke people who are supposedly so against oppression are welcoming this religion that separates women from their clitorises, that believe that gays should be thrown off buildings, and they want to turn their eye to Christianity and criticize how Christianity treats women, which I'm also not saying is perfect, but by God, there is a huge, huge difference. And Egypt is considered to be a moderate Muslim country, but over 80% of people there polled believe that homosexuality should be penalized by the death penalty. So who are we letting into our cultures that we have worked so hard to build? Who are we letting in? And what impact will this have over a period of decades? It is absolutely an essential question to be asking, setting aside even all these gruesome terrorist attacks, which are nightmarish and do change how people live and how safe they feel in their lives. Setting that aside, just the cultural piece.
I do find myself, I always want to go to the other side of things, but it's small, but
Please.
there are reform movements, not probably for some of these countries that are majority Muslim, but I think about like Asra Nomani, who's been writing a lot about
she's lovely.
Red Green Alliance. I
Yes.
think about Urshad Manji. Like there are people who have been trying to, or the woman, I saw her at the Dissident Dialogues Conference, the one from Iran with her hair free.
Yeah.
There are people that are advocating for a more modernized, reformed version of Islam, and so that exists. However, I think some of these people that are coming in and having this cultural rub are of the more fundamentalist, more older iteration of that, and so that is like where it's a huge problem.
I'd like to talk with someone about that. What is
these people are heroes that are trying to make it a more moderate, truly loving religion. They're heroes, and they do it at their own peril because a lot of these people
life threats.
But within
Islam, lost an eye.
Within Islam, wasn't there a much more moderate worldview until the imam came and took over? I mean, wasn't that in like the 70s or 80s? And then they really cracked down. That was in Iran. But then didn't that spur on a more fundamentalist bent in Islam?
It did it to a certain degree because the schism within Islam between Shia and Sunni is really quite like vicious and deep seated. And when, from my understanding, having studied this like over a decade ago, when Iran established an Islamic republic, it kind of spurred on Sunnis to try and emulate them and outdo them in terms of their piety and their crusade, their jihad. So it did have some kind of effect. Yeah. I mean, I actually hate talking about Islam, partly because I simply don't feel qualified to, but I paid close attention to it, 10, 15 years ago, well, since 9/11, really. So 25 years ago. But I hate the discussion necessarily and understandably is somewhat totalizing. And I hate that about it. I hate that about it because, there's people of so many different nationalities and ethnicities that are Muslim.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I that really bothers me about it. Having said that, the West, the decrepit elites of the West, something I'm much more comfortable talking about, are aiding and abetting. Not sorry, they are. It's not they are. They have aided and abetted, and the takeover in many parts of the United Kingdom is already in place. It's already happened. So much like I think that this the word might seem inflammatory to some, but like the communist, the neo-Maoist sort of takeover of large parts of the United States infrastructure has also taken place. This has taken place already in the United Kingdom, and it has been that way for decades. The white working class has been absolutely destroyed. Tommy Robinson, who you couldn't say his name in polite company here, not just among normal people, not even like a high society, titans of government. Normal people would think, would recoil at the name Tommy Robinson. He was like sends an electric shock through. And I've heard that claims that he's committed some kinds of fraud or whatever. I don't know. What I do know is that man gets arrested more than any child rapist in Rotherham ever has, and his entire point of his crusade has been to protect these girls. I think a lot of the reason why, well, he's been so maligned by the powers that be, obviously because he's effective and he's over the target, as Bannon would always say, right? But it's also the fact that when people who are middle class and upper middle class hear working class people talk, they're genuinely frightened because the upper classes are fucking pansies and they've never heard these people talk. And it sounds very much like they're being aggressive, but they're vehemently making their points, and they're not couching it in the approved language, and then they're not couching it in the approved tone, and then they're not putting in the approved caveats and the paeans and the lip service to the approved narrative. So when a regular normal person who hasn't been trained in this way of thinking and speaking comes along and is very effectively putting across a point, a lot of upper middle class people literally set their hair on fire and run in the opposite direction because they think they're going to like get beaten up by this person. I mean, you could say, oh, you're
It's the
being
class
flippant.
issue then. That's
I
really
actually
interesting.
definitely
There's
I don't
actually
think I'm
like a
exaggerating. It
class
is 100%
accent.
a class issue. Tommy Robinson is a very alpha male working class dude. And if you've never come across any of those people and you spent your time like reading critical theory in Oxford or Cambridge or, the London School of Economics, you don't know what to do with that. There's no way you can react to that. So you have to pull levers of power to shut him down because he is a much more effective communicator and has much more the common touch than anyone in government ever will.
You know what makes me angry at all of this, and it's happening here too, right? Is this immediate far right, whatever, right? Thug, these labels, right? That are just being put on anybody who's doing any of this objecting. And it just, I watch amongst even my own peers who just like immediately have this disgust and they must be extreme and they must be racist and they must be whatever. And they just slap that on there so fast.
Well, it's the demonization. It's what they've done so well to Trump.
Yes.
I mean, he's a lot of things, but he's also, it sounds like this Tommy Robinson character, who I don't know much about him, but his reputation is that he's, the far right thing that sticks. And then Trump gets that too. And so anybody who talks like this gets thrown into that camp. And so it's like building an effigy so that you have a person, a character in whom to concentrate all of this. And then that's your straw man, that's your argument. That's your association, guilt by association. You're making arguments that sound like this low class person or this racist or this bigot or whatever. So you can be swept aside by association.
It's also, what also happens that is even more important is that if you are, just going about your business, say 10 years ago or something, when this started to be talked about, and you might say something like, oh, I don't know, maybe Tommy Robinson has a point. The it would be like someone, like the person you're speaking with had like a recoil, like an electric shock went through them, and such a strong reaction that you were then, oh shit, I'm never going to say that again.
Oh,
Because I just
100%.
exposed myself as a far right racist. And if I ever step out of line like that again, I am going to be tarred with the same brush. And it is
That's
the
right.
most effective way of shutting down normal
Mhm.
discourse. Because again, I have no idea if Tommy Robinson is a good person, a bad person, or somewhere in between. I genuinely don't know. I genuinely don't know.
Mhm.
Okay. I don't know. All I know is when I hear him speak, I think, oh, this man knows how to get his point across. He's very effective. Right. And I've also heard him say plenty of things that are not racist, like categorically not racist. Maybe he said things that are
Yeah.
racist and I haven't heard them. I have no idea. Okay.
Mhm.
But the point is that when you have someone who's effective like that, you are not allowed to his virality, like the viral speeches he gives, are kept in check by the fact that normies are afraid to openly express any
Right.
kind of support.
Yeah, because it's a
That's
matter
right.
of deterrence. Yeah.
Yeah,
Jennifer?
the biggest phobia is being called anything phobic, transphobic, Islamophobic. It is so effective in shutting down discourse, which if you shut down conversations, you shut down the ability to think, because that is how we formulate our thoughts, is through talking with others.
Yeah. And going back into history, like any times that the divided working class have made efforts to come together, that's always been, at least in my understanding of history, my understanding of history's changed a lot recently. So this could be a fairy tale, but like certainly like I've heard it said like Malcolm X and Huey Newton and people like that were assassinated after they stopped being so race radical and started to understand that it was a
Mhm.
class struggle, not a racial struggle. And those people were whacked. So like I'm just saying, like and again, I don't know, like I'm sure that you could poke holes in that theory, but anything that unites working class men together in pursuit of some sort of basic fairness and justice, which is how we always used to understand the left. Anytime that happens, people tend to get murdered, and the government really tends to crack down on that. So, I mean, not to sound conspiratorial, but it's in every bit of the government's interest, and it's all the successive governments, is every bit in the interest of entrenched power to divide those they rule. This is
Yeah,
not this
that's
is
right.
not a
That's right.
controversial thing to say. That's
No,
all that's
No.
happening
it's
now.
as old as
It's
rulership.
literally as old as time.
Mhm. Yeah. It's so we're coming up to the hour. Deborah, Jennifer, you have any final thoughts synthesizing all of this?
Nothing raises
How
my
do we
ire
solve
like
the
this
problem,
topic.
Jennifer?
I'm like so mad right now. Nothing gets me as mad as this topic. This is really just a big thing for me. I feel like I think we've had it too good for too long in the West, and we have failed to appreciate it. And what you don't value, you don't protect, and what you don't protect, you will lose. And I hope that we wake up fully before it's too late.
100%.
It seems like a paradox of this is that one of the things that we value in our culture is its openness, is its tolerance, and its acceptance of difference. And that very thing can be your undoing.
Yeah.
And yet
That's the liberalism issue.
And that's
Yeah.
being
the
used,
liberalism
right.
issue.
And
Yeah.
that's being used against us. And that's
Yes.
why it's like, if you can't make, that's why you can't make diversity more important than unity.
Yeah.
Yes. That's exactly right.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you to everybody who's been in the chat. Ash Brown says it's been fascinating to listen to you talking about Britain as outsiders, except Jenny. And
I'm a bit of an outsider.
You're closer.
Yeah,
You can see it from your window.
Claudina
it's raining.
Green.
It's raining here.
Claudina Green says, same with Pierre Poilievre here in Canada. They accuse him of being Trump-like, but he bears no resemblance. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And we will be back with you next Monday. I hope everybody has a wonderful week. Thank you, ladies, for this great conversation. Sorry we didn't solve the world's problems.
That's next week. Next week we'll have it all fixed.
Tune in
We'll have
next
it all
week. That's
sorted.
right.